E-Content Development Course, Business Research Methods Topic, Chi-Square Test of Significance. Learning objectives: to understand the significance of Chi-Square test in research, to know the types of Chi-Square distribution, to understand what exactly is goodness of fit test in Chi-Square distribution, to learn what are different situations where Chi-Square test can be used, to know the assumptions of Chi-Square test, to understand the illustration on Chi-Square test of independence, to learn the computation of expected frequencies and degrees of freedom, to know the reporting of the results of Chi-Square tests of independence. Introduction. Hello friends, I welcome you all for our lecture series on data analysis. The topic for the today's discussion is Chi-Square test of significance. In the previous episodes, you have learnt that various statistical measures of univariate, bivariate and multivariate populations, parametric and non-parametric tests of significance. A number of statistical techniques are available to assist. 2. The researcher in interpreting the data. Choosing the right tool for the analysis is crucial task. In this episode, we will be discussing about the Chi-Square distribution and Chi-Square tests. For better understanding, this episode is divided into 5 sections. Section 1, Introduction. Section 2, Goodness of fit and Chi-Square test of independence. Section 3, Illustration on Chi-Square test of independence. Section 4, Solution. Section 5, Reporting Chi-Square tests for independence. The use of statistical tools to analyze the data collected is being given utmost importance in research studies. The main emphasis has been given on extracting appropriate information from the data which was collected to address predetermined objectives of the study. It is very important for any researcher to choose an appropriate tool for the same purpose. The most frequently used testes in research are t-test, f-test and Chi-Square test. It is important to note that all the three depends on the assumption of normality. In this episode, we will be discussing on Chi-Square test in detail. Chi-Square test. The Chi-Square test is a statistical procedure used by researchers to examine the differences between categorical variables in the same population. This test is most useful when analyzing cross-tabulations of survey response data. Because cross-tabulations reveal the frequency of responses to questions by various segments or categories of respondents such as gender, profession, education level, etc. The Chi-Square test informs researchers about whether or not there is statistically significant difference between how the various segments or categories answered to given question. 3. The Greek letter X2 was first used to describe this citation by Karl Pearson the early 1900s. The Chi-Square statistic is a non-parametric tool designed to analyze group differences when the dependent variable is measured at a nominal level. Like all non-parametric statistics, the Chi-Square test is also a distribution-free test. It does not require equality of variances among the study groups or homoscedasticity in the data. It permits evaluation of both dichotomous independent variables and multiple group studies. 2 important things to note when considering the Chi-Square test, they are: firstly, Chi-Square only tests whether two individual variables are independent in a binary format or yes or no format. Secondly, Chi-Square requires researchers to use numerical values, also known as frequency counts, instead of using percentages. Chi-Square distribution. The chi-score distribution is a theoretical distribution which has a wide applicability in research work. Chi-square test can be broadly classified into two categories. The first type of chi-square test is the goodness of fit test. And the second type of chi-square test is the test of independence. Section 2, Goodness of fit and chi-square test of independence. Now let's understand what exactly is goodness of fit test in chi-square. Goodness of fit test measures how likely it is that an observed distribution is due to chance. It is also called a goodness of fit statistic, because it measures how well the observed distribution of data fits with distribution that is expected if the variables are independent. This is a test which makes a statement or claim concerning the nature of the distribution for the whole population. In other words, the data in the sample is examined in order to see whether this distribution is consistent with the hypothesized distribution of the population or not. The chi-square goodness of fit test can be used to examine how closely a sample matches a population. Chi-square test of independence. 4. The chi-square test of independence is also known as the Pearson chi-square test or simply the chi-square test. It is one of the most useful statistics for testing hypotheses when the variables are nominal. This test is designed for qualitative or categorical data where the observations can be counted but have no inherent measurement. Chi-square independence test is also called as categorical correlation. Linear correlation and regression assess the relationship between the quantitative variables. If we want to test the relationship between categorical variables, chi-square independent test can be used. In particular, chi-square test of independence determines whether there is a statistically significant relationship between categorical variables. It is a hypothesis test that answers the question, do the values of one categorical variable depend on the value of other categorical variables? The chi-square test for independence of two categorical is a test which uses a cross-classification table to examine the nature of the relationship between these variables. These tables are sometimes referred to as contingency tables. The test for independence examines whether the observed pattern between the variables in the table is strong enough to show that the two variables are dependent. This test is quite distinct from the test of goodness of fit test. The goodness of fit test examines only one variable, while the test of independence is concerned with the relationship between two variables. The chi-square test for independence is conducted by assuming that there is no relationship between the two variables being examined. What are the different situations where chi-square test can be used? There are many situations where the underlying distribution is non-normal or unknown, or where it is not possible for the researcher to make rigid assumptions about the shape of the population from which the samples have been drawn for the study. Statisticians have developed a class of alternative techniques known as nonparametric or distribution-free methods. 5. A nonparametric method may be defined as a test in which no hypothesis is made about specific values of population parameters. Nonparametric statistics are used when the data are measured in nominal or categorical scales, or when the underlying distributions violate the assumptions of parametric statistics. Assumptions of chi-square test. 1. Chi-square assume the data were obtained through random selection. 2. The data in the cells should be frequencies or counts of cases rather than percentages or some other transformation of the data. 3. The levels or categories of the variables are mutually exclusive. 4. The study groups must be independent. A special concern with regard to the chi-square statistic is that chi-square is extremely sensitive to sample size. When the sample size is too large, approximately more than 500, almost any small difference will appear statistically significant. It is also sensitive to distribution within the cells. Section 3. Illustration on chi-square test of independence. Illustration. To illustrate the calculation and interpretation of the chi-square statistic, let us consider an example. A sample survey was undertaken to assess the relationship between alcohol consumption and heart problems. The data have been presented in the cross-classification table. Respondents' heart problems noticed, heart problems not noticed total. Persons who consume alcohol 138, 110, 62, 90, 200. 6. Persons who do not consume alcohol 82, 110, 118, 90, 200. Total 220180400. Out of 200 persons who consume alcohol, 138 persons have been noticed with heart problems and 62 sample respondents have not been noticed with heart problem. Out of 200 persons who do not consume alcohol, 82 persons have been noticed with heart problems and 118 persons have not been noticed with heart problems. On the basis of cross-classification data, would it be possible to conclude that alcohol consumption and heart problems are independent? Use chi-square test of independence at 5% level of significance. Section 4. Solution. The chi-square test for independence of two variables is a test which uses a cross-classification table to examine the nature of the relationship between these variables. This test is conducted by assuming that there is no relationship between the two variables being examined. The alternative hypothesis is that there is some relationship between the variables. Statistical relationships and association. There are various types of statistical relationships which can exist among variables. Each of these types of relationship involves some of connection or association between the variables. The chi-square test of independence begins with the statement of the null and research hypotheses. The null hypothesis states that there is no association or no relationship between the two variables. This means that the distribution of persons who consume alcohol and heart problems noticed should be equal to the distribution of persons who consume alcohol and heart problems not noticed. In this illustration, by examining the two columns, it can be seen that distributions are not identical. 7. The question is whether the differences in the distributions of class between heart problems noticed and not noticed are large enough to reject the hypothesis of independence. SWIT P1, formulation of hypotheses. These hypotheses could be stated in any of these two forms. In terms of relationship, the hypotheses could be H0, there is no significant relationship between the variables heart problems and alcohol consumption. H1, there is a significant relationship between the variables heart problems and alcohol consumption. In terms of independence and dependence, the hypotheses could be H0. Heart problems and alcohol consumption are independent to each other. H1, heart problems and alcohol consumption are dependent to each other. Step 2, computation of expected frequencies. For computation of expected number of cases for each cell of the table, consider top left cell. It's a intersection value of number of persons who consume alcohol and number of persons noticed. With heart problems, the observed frequency is 138. In order to determine the expected number of cases for this, cell E is equal to row total times column total. Grand total is equal to 200 times 220/400 is equal to 110 is the expected frequency of the cell. Consider the cell, persons who consume alcohol and heart problem not noticed. Intersection value of these two cells is 62 or the observed frequency is 62. In order to determine the expected number of cases for this cell is E is equal to row total times column total. Grand total 8 is equal to 200 times 180 divided by 400 equals 90. Each of the expected numbers in the cells can obtain in the same manner. Step 3. Computation of chi-square test statistic using the formula. Chi-square is equal to OE to E. Table showing the calculations of chi-square test statistic. Category observed frequent YOI. Expect D freq NCY. A. Observed expected is equal to OE. OE to OE to E. Persons who consume alcohol and heart problem noticed. One hundred and 110 138 minus 110 equals 28 to 82 is equal to 784 784 divided by 110 equals 7.1 to 7. Persons who consume alcohol and heart problem not noticed. 60 to 90 60 to -90 is equal to 28 to 82 is equal to 784 784 divided by 90 equals 8. 711. Persons who do not consume alcohol and heart problem noticed. 80 to 110 80 to -110 is equal to 28 to 82 is equal to 784 784 divided by 110 equals 7.1 to 7. Persons who do not consume alcohol and heart problem not noticed. 118 90 118 minus 90 equals 28 to 82 is equal to 784 784 divided by 90 equals 8. 711. Therefore, calculated chi-square value is equal to 31.676. Step 4. Computation of degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom in chi-square test can be calculated by multiplying the number of rows -1 by the number of columns -1. Degrees of freedom is equal to number of rows 1, number of columns -1. 9. In this illustration, number of rows is equal to 2 and number of columns is equal to 2. Therefore, degrees of freedom is equal to 2 to 1 times 2 to 1 is equal to 1 means once you enter a number for one cell, let's say 138 in the first cell, the numbers for all the other cells are predetermined by the row and columns totals. 220 minus 138 equals 82. 200 minus 138 equals 62. 180 minus 62 equals 118. They are not free to vary. So the chi-square test for independence has only one degree of freedom for a 2 times 2 contingency table. Respondents' heart problems noticed, heart problems not noticed total. Persons who consume alcohol 138. 200. Persons who do not consume alcohol 200. Total 220180400. Step 5. Selection of level of significance. Significance level is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. The significance level is also denoted as alpha or alpha, is a measure of the strength of the evidence that must be present in sample before we reject the null hypothesis. The researchers determines the significance level before conducting the research studies. Lower significance level indicates that you require stronger evidence before you reject the null hypothesis. In the given problem, level of significance is 5%. Step 6. Obtaining critical value. 10. Critical value can be obtained from chi-square distribution table at 5% level of significance and 1 degree of freedom. The critical value is 3.841. Step 7. Decision rule. Since the calculated chi-square value is greater than the critical value, i.e. 31.676 is greater than 3.841, the null hypothesis of there is no significant relationship between the variables heart problems and alcohol consumption can be rejected, and the alternative hypothesis there is a significant relationship between the variables heart problems and alcohol consumption can be accepted. Section 5. Reporting chi-square tests for independence. When reporting the results of chi-square tests of independence, the table of expected values and the value of the chi-square statistic are usually given. The expected values are not ordinarily reported, and these can easily be computed by the reader. In addition to the chi-square statistic obtained from the table, it is common to report the exact significance level. The researcher may also provide some measure of association to summarize the relationship. The degrees of freedom may also be reported, although this is not really necessary, since the reader can easily compute the degrees of freedom. Using these values, the nature of the relationship can be determined. The methodological problem is the difficulty of deciding the proper approach to the grouping of the data. There are not strict guidelines concerning how data is to be grouped properly. To sum up, the chi-square test for independence is an extremely flexible and useful test. The test can be used to examine the relationship between any two variables with any types of measurement, nominal, ordinal, interval or ratio. The purpose of chi-square is to find out, is there any significant association between the two variables or not. The only constraint on the use of the test is that there are sufficient numbers of cases in each cell of the table. The chi-square test is applicable in the situation when there are two categorical variables from a single population. A special concern. 11. With regard to the chi-square statistic is that chi-square is extremely sensitive to sample size. When the sample size is too large, approximately more than 500, almost any small difference will appear statistically significant. It is also sensitive to distribution within the cells.